You're listening to the Biblically Speaking podcast with Trey North, along with special guests discussing everyday life issues from a biblical perspective. Now, let's listen to the podcast. Welcome to Biblically Speaking Podcast. My name is Trey North, and on this podcast, I talk with brilliant minds all over the world about everyday life issues from a biblical perspective. Each episode is like iron sharpening iron, and if you're married or even thinking about tying the knot and are listening or watching today's podcast, this episode is tailor-made for you. My special guests want you to know that God does not want your marriage to merely survive. God wants your marriage to thrive. Their unique experiences working in ministry, the military, and the legal profession have given them the insight into key elements that leads couples to having a thriving marriage, and they want to be a resource to couples and churches to help build that thriving marriage. He's my guest on the left and has served in the ministry and Michigan Air National Guard for over 20 years, including a deployment to the Middle East. The beautiful woman sitting next to him is one of the top probate and estate lawyers in the state of Michigan and has also worked in family and business law. They currently live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, with their two children, Brenda and Jonathan. Please welcome to the podcast authors of their new book entitled Operation Thriving Marriage, Bryon and Jennifer Harvey. Welcome to the Biblical Speaking Podcast.
Oh, thanks so much, Trey, for having us. We're so excited to be here.
Thank you, Trey, very much. It's exciting for us.
This is an honor. I appreciate it. Listen, we're going to talk about the key essentials of marriage, but I want to get into this book that you wrote. It's called Operation Thriving Marriage. And the first chapter, you asked the question, why are you married? And before we get in that key essential, I think it's very vital. That's a good question to start out with. Why are you married to begin with? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people, the question that you get a lot of times, you go to different, even on cruise ships, they're doing the not so newlywed game and stuff. And they always want to hear the story. Why did you get married? They want to tell the story of how you met and how you fell in love. And that's a wonderful story. It's a beautiful story. We love sharing our story. We love hearing others. It's awesome how God brings people together. But after you tie the knot, why are you still married? That's not a question people ask very often. Why are you sticking together? What is it? And some people, it's just, they don't know. Some people, it's just what you do. When it comes to faith in God and what God's doing in marriage, it's important to have his perspective of what marriage is. So you know why you're sticking together, why this matters, why it's important to you as a couple, but also how you are on mission as a couple to represent God to the world through that relationship that you have.
Wow. Well, I in reading the first chapter, I love what you said. You said marriage does not have its end game as personal happiness. It's rather about personal holiness. And in the book, and I'm not going to give it all away, but listen, that's very key. And you said you should not stay married to become happier. You should be married to be holier. I just found that very interesting, and it's truth. It's biblical. People get married for lots of reasons, love, happiness. There's the ecstasy stage where it's all cherries and rainbows until, like you said in the book, until the mask comes off and the real issues arise, and you find yourself asking that question, why am I married?
Absolutely. And I think that the idea too is when we're talking about holiness, I think unfortunately kind of pop culture in America is going to say that holiness is somehow stuffy or boring. And we all know that when it comes down to it, God created us to be living into our fullest potential, into the fullest of beings of who we are and who he created us to be. And he's a loving father. He wants us to certainly be happy, to experience his joy, to experience and live into his purpose. So if as you're growing into the holiness, you're growing into the joy and what God wants for us. And happiness is just such a fleeting kind of thing. So it's really like that chasing in the after the wind that Solomon writes about. So we want to make sure that we're living into that holiness, that as iron sharpens iron, really marriage should be that safest human relationship that you can have. And when you are doing marriage God's way, that's the way that it was designed to be. That's the way that it's done right. You're going to really significantly lean into and live into what God wants for you.
Oh, that's
Yeah, we know
beautiful.
that things aren't right. I mean, that Jesus came to fix things, a new creation to begin to fix things that aren't right. And we're really good at deceiving ourselves though and thinking, hey, I'm all right. It's all y'all are the ones that are messed up. I'm doing great. And marriage is there to help us see, hey, I'm not all there. Okay. That's not all okay yet. I need to get better. And part of that is you've got the person closest to you that loves you more than anyone other than Jesus ever will. And so they can gently, lovingly say, hey, you know what you just did there? That wasn't God
Mm,
honoring. And we need to fix that.
mm.
And the marriage relationship is the safest place to do that because you know that you're on the same team. You know that we're in this together.
I
And
like
I
that.
really feel like if someone's listening to this and they're saying, "Hey, my marriage isn't where I want it to be," we like to let folks know that just by these next decisions that you're going to be making, you're probably closer to a thriving marriage than you think.
Oh, wow. Wow. You know, I like when what you talk about that word happiness because you know for a long time I didn't get that. I'm not responsible. This might sound bold, but I'm not responsible for your happiness. It's an emotion. I can do everything that I can to try to make you happy, but at the end of the day, I can't, that's an emotion, that's your emotion. And
How
I'm not
could you,
responsible
right?
for your happiness. Yeah, yeah, I'm not responsible for your happiness. And man, I just love the way this book says you should not stay married to become happier. You should be married or stay married to become holier. I just love that. It just resonated in my spirit about that. Um, let's talk about that team. You were talking about team marriage concept. Let's talk about that. What are some of like I guess these would be parts of the key essential elements into having that thriving marriage. What do you say those key elements are and how to keep a not just happy marriage but a thriving marriage?
Well, I think, yeah. So, first of all, getting into that team marriage, one of the things that's really important is presuming the goodwill of the other. And what we mean by that is we're in this together, we're a team in this. And sometimes we're not going to understand things aren't working out the way you want them to. And then you have to look at each other and say, I don't know where we're at here. I don't know why we got there, but I don't think you're trying to sabotage it. I believe deep down in my heart that you want what's best for us, that you want what's best for the marriage. And that's important. A lot of couples, they get in this sick cycle of, oh my gosh, do they really want what I want? Are we really on the same page? And you have to start with the idea in your brain. You have to be thinking, I believe we're in this together. I believe you want us to have a thriving marriage. When you start with that belief, the feelings and the attitudes will follow that. But you have to choose to have that believe that, hey, we are in this together, and I believe that you want the good for us and for our marriage.
And we have each other's backs all the time, just like any well-working team is. I mean, that's how our son is playing little league. That's how the professionals play sports. And any kind of team that you have going. I think from people who are in theater or television actors at the workplace, I think the spouses have to have that big kind of team perspective as well. If one is hurting, the other one's hurting. If one is struggling with things, the other one is ultimately struggling because of that oneness that we do have in marriage. And we really think that marriage can really be that great reflection of the Trinity because it's three unique persons in one God. And just like that, marriage shows two unique people in one couple.
Oh, I love
And
it.
it's a really beautiful way that God sets that up for us, so we can be that little glimmer of a part of a suggestion of what the Trinity is.
That's beautiful. I love that. I like the way you because it's God the Father, the Son
Yeah.
and Holy, the Trinity, and then it's the same. The couples, they're becoming one and they're in Christ. What do you say? Because after the mascara, wears off and the mask come off, and the I always call it the representative goes and use 6 months, and then because let's be real, it's all lovey and dovey in the beginning, and then the real you comes, and some of those habits and some of those things that you do, attitudes, begin to show up. The real you comes out, and would you say, let me ask you this, would you say communication is also keeps the marriage thriving? Because when I say communicate, the way you talk to your spouse, because I believe that is so important. I mean, what do you say? The team is good, but what do you say about how you speaking to one another, the tones, inflections in your voice, or just general conversation? How important is that for having a thriving marriage?
Well, I'd say that there's kind of two things here that you're talking about, Trey, which is I would say communication is so vital, but so is community. So I think in America, the way that we have things set up for getting to know somebody who's a potential spouse, a lot of times you're away from other people, and because you're going out to the movies, just the two of you, you're going out for dinners, just the two of you, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that one-on-one time I think is important, but I think it's nice to see, how is this person behaving around my family, my friends, my church community? How is this person doing when they're under stress? Maybe they're volunteering with you or working with you, just so that you'd be able to see what's going on, so you can kind of vet that person out. So we can kind of see underneath that veil of what's going on before the lovey-dovey wears off. How is this person treating other people, not just me, because that individual is trying to impress me? But I really think that the communication, as you've indicated, is just so key. And it's what you're saying, it's how you're saying it, what's your body language. I know they talk about the concept of naval intelligence, because if your belly button is facing the person that you're talking to, that's the person that's the focus of how you're communicating. And it's just really making sure that you're treating your spouse then as they have something important to say. There's something that's valuable there. And if you're too busy to talk right in that moment, kind of depending on what's going on, of course, during the pandemic and kind of even still, people are still working out of their homes. I'm doing a lot of work from home myself, as has Bryon. But sometimes it's like, hey, I'm tied up with this thing. I can't talk to you and give you my full attention right now. Let's reconvene another time. Or if there's an emergency, sometimes you got to stop something and go with it. But I always think that it's important to be communicating love to your spouse. And love oftentimes is confused with listening, because we in America, we're putting so much out on social media, and we just want to talk, and nobody wants to listen. And it's important to bring that back into all relationships, and that it's especially marriage.
And Trey, you're absolutely right. You talked about kind of when the mascara comes off is the language you use, or when the mask.
My mascara?
Not yours. It's actually mine. My mascara kind of it's bad. No, and there's a couple chapters in the book that we actually talk about, and one of them is you want to speak to be heard. You want to speak in a way that it's easy to listen to, and that's one of the things that oftentimes we grow up in environments where we're not used to that, and in schools and different things, we're not taught to speak in a way that is easy to be heard. It's not honored as much in our culture anymore. And then also, you need to listen in a way that people want to speak to you. There was a recent meme that we saw on Facebook, and it said, speak in a way that everyone wants to listen to you, and listen in a way that everyone wants to talk to you. And that's exactly what you were getting at, that tone of voice, and making sure that how you say it is just as important as the words you say. But it's not just that. For those of you that are married or dating or in any sort of relationship, it's not enough to just expect them to speak to you in the way you want to be spoken to. You need to listen to them in the way they want you to listen. And like Jen said, we haven't learned that in our culture. We are radioing all the time, and we're not tuning in very much. We need to tune into each other and really learn how to use our full body to hear the message. Then when you're sending a good message, it's easier for the receiver to receive that message, and you guys can get through that together.
That's good. It's I think that communication, and like you said, it's not always what you say, it's how you say it. And I do love the fact that you said that, because when you're when you're trying to, especially in a marriage where you're Christians, and you, because I believe in, as when you're married, you're imparting into each other lives. But it'll be hard for kind of for your spouse to receive anything that you have to say, when they just got through cussing you out, you know what I mean,
Yeah,
or
that's so
speaking to you.
true.
Absolutely.
I mean, inappropriately, you know what I mean? Nobody's trying to hear that, and everybody's different. What I've learned and I've been divorced, but what I did learn, I've been divorced, I'm divorced, but what I learned in my marriage is, is the fact that it's not what you say, it's how you say it, but also it's that everybody, you can't speak to everybody the same way. If you have children, I have two boys, I could not communicate with them the same way. One is a little sensitive, and one that likes it straight up and raw, dad, just give
Yeah.
it to me plain and straight. And the other one's like, if you went to him like that, he'd be in his feelings, and then he wouldn't be able to, receive. And so I think that
Mhm.
same way to our spouses. I see a lot of spouses and have witnessed a lot of spouses talking better to other people than they do their
Mhm.
own their own spouse. I'm like, no, you go home with that person, you know what I mean, and you sleep with that person, and you share intimacy, you share memories, moments, you got kids, and you talk to others better than you talk to your wife or your husband. And I just find that communication is very important in a marriage, especially one of the key essentials to marriage. What else do you have to offer? I mean, as far as the key essentials, are there any other um um essentials to keeping the thriving marriage? I know we're talking about communication, but what else is important? I mean, what
I,
else do you feel?
I think a big thing is what we call in the book unexpectations. And here's the deal. Every argument you've ever had
Mm,
at its root, at its core, was because of an unmet expectation. There was something you expected, something you wanted, and that didn't come about the way you wanted or how you expected it. And that started the argument. Every argument in marriage that ever happens, it comes from some sort of expectation, whether it's how you were loading the dishwasher, whether it was how you communicated, whether it was how you communicated to your
mm,
children or to your in laws. There's something there that you had an expectation that wasn't met. And a lot of the times, it's not that the person doesn't care. Matter of fact, remember going to that presumption of goodwill, your spouse cares about your expectations, but these unmet expectations usually come from three things. One, an unvoiced expectation. You had an expectation, but I didn't know because you didn't tell me. So it's just,
mm,
I didn't know, so I couldn't meet your expectation. Then unshared expectations. These are those expectations you get from your friends, especially from your family, or different things that you've read or seen where it's like, oh, this is how marriage ought to be. But just because you think that because you experienced that in your life or growing up doesn't mean your spouse had that same experience.
Mhm.
And
wow.
so that's an unshared expectation. And then some expectations, it's just, they're just flat unreasonable and you got to get over it.
Mhm.
You can't expect those unreasonable expectations to be met. Especially a lot of people commit idolatry in a marriage.
Mm,
They
mm.
put their spouse in the place of God. And Jen is an amazing lawyer. She's a wonderful mom and the best wife ever. I'm sorry, guys, I got the best one.
Come on now. Come on.
She is a really bad God. She doesn't do Jesus well. I can't get my identity from her. I can't get my purpose from her. I can't get my security in her or in our relationship. All those come from Jesus, who died for me and loves me and has the ability to do it. And so a lot of those expectations that are unreasonable are you're expecting your spouse to be something they just can't be because they're not God.
Mhm.
Do you think that some of those expectations derive from carrying baggage from previous relationships? Would you say that would be
Oh,
accurate?
always. And I think again, those previous relationships could be past romantic relationships, and it could also certainly be from parents and other family members, teachers, and things like that that were those bigger influences when you were growing up.
Or even the
Mm.
friends you have. Be careful how you talk about your marriage at work or at the gym or when you're out playing ball. And be careful what you listen to about other people's marriage. But then
That's
also
good.
careful how you watch television and read books and listen to music. I'm not saying don't do those things. We love watching television shows and movies together. We love to, but be aware of what's going on and make sure you're aware. Hey, I'm sorry, but it works really well on a TV show, but every problem's not solved in 55 minutes with commercials.
Right.
If they've got great
Exactly.
writers that are going to make it a happy ending, and that's just not how it always can work out in real life, because we don't have those writers in there. But the other thing too is I think oftentimes, as Bryon was indicating, your friends are your future. And I've seen so many things happen where you've got one lady in a crew of friends, and she's getting divorced, and then the next lady's getting divorced, and then the next one is. Obviously, it's something where, you know, you can have a mix of different friends and people. You're in the church, you know, you can be certainly a woman can be friends with other women, whether they're single, divorced, married,
Mhm.
you know, widowed, doesn't really matter there. But I think that you really have to be careful about the company you keep and what is coming into what kind of messages your friends are giving, and just be so aware of that.
Yeah, if you want a thriving marriage, then you want friends that want you to have a thriving marriage. If your friends, if the people you're closest to don't value marriage, then
Mhm.
it's not impossible. In God, everything's possible. But if all the message you're hearing is marriage isn't good, you know, life after marriage, the old ball and chain, and all of
Right.
those cliches and stuff, if that's the stuff you're hearing and those are the friends you have, it's going to be harder to have a thriving marriage because they don't value your marriage. And your friends, whether you like it or not, influence your thoughts, influence your beliefs that
That's
influence what you
true.
do.
Mhm.
That's true. That's true. Okay, now, Jen, I wanna, I wanna switch this a little bit, because you are a lawyer.
I sure am. I love my job.
Okay, now, having the experience with being a lawyer, family law, or being a Christian, and trying to, how does that work? You know what I mean? Like when
Oh,
you
I
when,
hear
when
you,
somebody
Trey.
goes, "Hey, I need your services." I need
Right.
it ain't working out, Jen. It's just not. What?
That's it. Well, Trey, I have done dozens and dozens of divorces, and fortunately, it hasn't been my own. So that's good news. But really and truly, whenever I get a phone call from somebody that's saying, "Hey, you know, it looks like I need to get a divorce," I just say, you know, hold up, are you sure you need me and you don't need a marriage counselor? And I think
Mm,
it's really important where the attorney is able to have some power in that, to be able to maybe say, is this relationship something that can be salvaged? And you know, sometimes people want to get divorced because I'm just not happy anymore. Well, let's see what can happen for more unity to be promoted in the marriage. You know, is this something where people need to refocus on their marriage? Do they need to go into counseling? Do they need to go on a retreat
good.
together? Well, you know, what needs to happen for them to connect up? And of course, if there are things that have happened, if we're looking at abuse, if we're looking at adultery, if we're
Mm,
looking at some addictions, you certainly need to have a counselor, a
mm,
licensed counselor and therapist intervene there. And there's never any shame in getting that kind of help. But I really think that when you have someone who is a Christian who is a divorce lawyer, I've had so many people come to me and say, my spouse has filed for divorce against me. Now what do I do? And in
mm,
Michigan, as in most states, there's something called no fault divorce, meaning you don't have to prove fault to get a divorce. But prior to 1973, when no fault divorce took place, people who were unhappily married would oftentimes hire a private investigator or a photographer, and they'd stage photos of one of them going in and out of a hotel with somebody from the opposite sex. They
wow.
weren't having an affair, but they were making it look like they were, so that they could both get divorced because they were so unhappy. And that's just not the case right now. But I think that the Christian lawyer is able to encourage that the couple would stay together if that's something that makes the most sense to do, to seek help. And also, if a divorce is being imposed on their client, can certainly protect their assets, make sure that they know their rights to the fullest extent of the law, make sure that the children of that marriage can certainly have appropriate parenting time with both parents, and make sure that the kids are safe. In that way, I think as best as you can, you make sure that those two people, then now mom and dad, even if they're divorced, they can still be on the same side of the church when their kids are getting married, because hopefully it wasn't some knockdown drag out.
Mm. Have you been fired before?
You know what? I love getting fired from the divorce cases, because I love it when I get the phone call that says, "Hey, Jennifer, you've done a great job, but guess what? We've reconciled, so you're fired, but you got to get this case dismissed first." That's my favorite case. And believe me, that's happened multiple times, and I just love it.
Oh man, I got a question for you, Bryon. Or both of you guys, what lesson or message would you like the audience to walk away with today, in regards to Operation Thriving Marriage?
Yeah, the key to everything we do, and I think this is important, you may be only one choice away from having a thriving marriage. A lot of the times, if you're listening to this and you're just, I'm not sure about this marriage, I'm not sure what's going on, 80% is wonderful. But the problem is, you look at that one little piece and you get stuck on that. And it's kind of like, you've got that little rock in your shoe, and the only thing you can think about is that rock. Well, the rest of your body is healthy and doing great. You just got that one little rock. Take off your shoe, dump out the rock, and then keep walking together. Your marriage is important, and it's valuable to you. It's valuable to God, and it can be thriving. And if you're not feeling that way, it's like, you know what? My marriage is good. Don't take it for granted. Make sure you're constantly thinking about making those choices. How can I be more loving to my spouse? Because if it's good right now, keep pushing it. In the military, we talk about continual process improvement. Nothing is ever good enough. It can always be better. And your marriage is the same way. It's not good enough. It can be better, and keep focusing on it. And then as you make it better, it's easier when those rough times come to get through those rough times.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, because you can have a thriving marriage even if you're going through difficult circumstances.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, wow. That's good. That's good. I'll be remiss if I didn't throw out some scriptures, because that's what we do here. So I got a couple, and then we're going to talk about, before we get out of here, we're going to talk about this book and all the good stuff you got going over there in Ann Arbor. I just want to say, guys, today that you guys are listening, 1 Peter 3:8, this is one that in my study time that resonated with me. And it says, finally, all of you be like-minded, united in spirit. And I'm reading from the Amplified version. Sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, courteous, and compassionate toward each other as members of one household, and humble in spirit. Verse 9, and never return evil for evil or insult for insult. Avoid scolding, berating, and any kind of abuse, but on the contrary, give a blessing. Pray for one another's well-being, contentment, and protection, for you have been called for this very purpose, that you might inherit a blessing from God that brings well-being, happiness, and protection. I love that scripture.
Amen.
It tells you how to treat each other.
And
It tells you how a husband and wife should treat each other. Yeah, you had something, right?
That's one of the things we'll often say to couples: how do you be a good Christian husband? How do you be a good Christian wife? Be a good Christian. Be a good Christ follower. If you do what Jesus said, if you do what he was saying in that passage in 1 Peter, then your marriage will thrive. It's not difficult to figure out. It can be hard to do sometimes because we're stubborn knuckleheads, but it's not something that's hard to figure out. Just look at how Jesus taught. Look at what Jesus expects of us, and then treat each other with the love that he expects us to treat people with.
That's good. That's good. Let's talk about the book now.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to put it on the screen. Operation Thriving Marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. This is it was so much fun to write. This was the first project we did together. I've been doing ministry, and we've had the opportunity to preach a couple times together and teach classes together, but actually to get this book out there. And it really started. We were teaching premarital classes together, and we had people coming to us say, "Hey, when's the book coming out?" I'm like, "What are we talking about? No, you got the class. What more do you need?" And then over time, we realized that, hey, we've got some more to say. And especially, you go through that premarital counseling, and then 6 months, a year, 2 years later, it's like, what were we talking about? Or this hiccup here, what's going on? So this is a resource just to help you look at yourself, look at your marriage, and the subtitle, it's a field manual for maximum performance and preventive maintenance. We want you to have maximum performance in your marriage. We want your marriage to thrive. But to do that, you have to do some preventative maintenance. Just like, I mean, in the military, we are doing preventive maintenance constantly in our equipment because we want it to last longer. Okay, there's equipment we're using in the military that is going to war right now that is older than us. It's been around since the 60s, the 50s, and it still works and works well because we've got great maintainers. Shout out to all my maintainers out there. We've got great maintainers that are taking care of it because they're doing that preventive maintenance. Your marriage will thrive, but you need to make sure you're taking care of it. You need to do that preventative maintenance. Take some time, if you feel things are a little squishy, talk to your pastor, talk to your small group, go to a retreat, pick up a book and read it, and make sure you're focusing on your relationship to make it stronger.
Wow, I like that preventive maintenance. That's true, isn't it? Don't we take our vehicles to get oil change? We take it to get brakes. We take it, we take it to get diagnosed to look at it and then see if it's functioning, like it should function. Why not in our marriage? Why not do that in our marriage? Preventive maintenance, because and I like that. It's good to always find out what the other is thinking. What they may be feeling. You don't know if they're harboring anything, or you know what I mean, or something that you have said that you completely forgot about and thought nothing about, and they could be harboring something in their spirit and cause them to look at you or feel about you in a certain way. So I love what you said about that preventive maintenance. That's awesome. Anything else additional about the book, or anything that you guys got going on? Any retreats or anything like that? Upcoming events that you have?
Oh, absolutely. And we're really excited about this because we're going to be leading a retreat in January 2022, and it's going to be the weekend of January 28th. Folks can go to Operation Thriving Marriage or go that is operationthrivingmarriage.com, or the retreat center's website location, which is richardbushrenewalcenter.com, and they can just go right ahead and book. And we're just so excited to host it because it's going to be an intensive, no more than 9 couples there, and I think it's just going to be a blast because we're going to be talking about communication. We're going to be talking about intimacy and forgiveness. I think that's just such a key component of marriage as well. And just a little sneak preview of that. It's not just enough in a marriage to have that thriving marriage, to have that forgiveness. You need that reconciliation as well. You need to make sure that you're not just forgiving each other and then parting ways. You got to make sure that you're coming back together as that team marriage.
And the retreat, it's in the beautiful scenic part of mid-Michigan, this wonderful retreat center, bed and breakfast. So meals are included as part of the retreat. And it is a time, like Jen said, no more than 9 couples. This is some personal attention for us to sit down and talk about marriage and build those relationships. And we'd love to meet some of your listeners in person and be a part of that.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Listen, everybody, it's Operation Thriving Marriage at Amazon, Westbow, Barnes & Noble. You guys got to pick this book up. I'm telling you, you got to. Oh, man, if you don't get it, you're doing yourself a disjustice. I mean, really, it's a good book. I'm halfway through. I'm not all the way through with it. I just picked it up this week, but it's really amazing. The things that they talk about in it is amazing. And I just want to say thank you so much for just giving up your time and your words of encouragement and wisdom and talking about some of the key essentials to marriage. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been a blessing to me. And I know that those that are listening right now, it's a blessing to them as well.
Well, thanks so much, Trey. It's been an honor to be here, and thanks for hosting us.
Thanks so much, Trey. This has been great. We really appreciate you and giving us the opportunity to share with your audience.
Thank you so much. Listen, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for the Biblically Speaking podcast. Don't forget to go to Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube and follow us at next15podcast.com, or you can follow us at Biblically Speaking or at Next15 Podcast. Don't forget that we do this every Saturday at 12:30 Central Standard Time. For myself and Bryon, I'm sorry. I always want to say Byron. You spell your name different.
It is. Yeah. It's just to throw you off, brother. It's just to throw you off. Make sure
My
you're paying attention.
My apologies for Bryon and Jen. Harvey, thank y'all so much for tuning in to the Biblically Speaking Podcast. We'll see you on next week. You've been listening to Biblically Speaking Podcast, presented by Next 15 Podcast Productions. If you would like to support the podcast, head over to next15podcast.com and click the Buy Me Coffee tab, where we will receive your donation of any size. Thank you in advance and for watching the podcast. We'll see you on next week.